Hi, and welcome to the Intuitive Insights podcast series. I'm Nina Lockwood, the founder and chief exec of Intuitive Talent Solutions. We work with leading transport organisations in the UK and bring them together with a diverse and talented candidate network for interim and permanent roles. The people who know me know that I like to immerse myself in good conversation. And over the course of the podcast series, I will be joined by some exceptionally talented leaders from the UK transport sector to talk about their careers, the industry, leadership, challenges and opportunities, and much more besides. I do hope that you'll join me and that you'll be inspired by my fabulous guests and their intuitive insights. For the first time in the history of the Intuitive Insights podcast, I am delighted to announce that we have a guest who is returning to the virtual couch. Louise Cheeseman, who is the founder and chair of Women in Bus and Coach and senior strategic advisor, appeared on the podcast for the first time in November 2020, episode 4. Louise joins me again on today's episode to share the latest chapter in her career and talk about what comes next. Louise Cheeseman, what an absolute joy it is to see you for your second appearance. You're the first guest to come back for another go, and it's an absolute delight to see you. I'm going to give you your formal title, if I may. Founder and chair of Women in Bus and Coach and senior strategic advisor, which is the new phase of your career, which I'm looking forward to hearing more about. But we spoke in November 2020. Obviously, you and I have spoken many times before and since, but you appeared on the Intuitive podcast in November 2020 as guest number 4. So we were still finding our feet, but you were brilliant. You shared your career story, but since then, you changed modes. So you got off the train, caught a bus, and then further things have happened, and I'm looking forward to you sharing the next chapter of your story with the Intuitive Insights podcast audience. So I'm going to hand over to you. Give us a little bit of, just in case people didn't watch the first episode, which is available on our website, so that they can scroll back in the back catalogue and find the first one if they would like a double helping of Louise, which is always a good idea.
That would be thoroughly boring.
No, not at all. And on the contrary, give us a whistle-stop tour through the kind of the career that where it took you up to the point where you decided that actually I'm going to go and have a look at what's going on in the bus industry. Give us a
Oh gosh, where do I start? So for 7 years I was a guard on the railway, single mum of 2 daughters. Became a manager back in 2007, working as a conductor team manager based in Sheffield. From then on, I had a number of managerial roles within Northern. Before that iconic moment when I got a phone call saying, would you go to London? Docklands Light Railway need a service delivery lead for the Olympics. And the DLR was obviously, it serviced all the main Olympic venues in the Olympics and Paralympics. So it was absolutely critical that it delivered. I have to say I'd never really been to London before. Going on my own and leaving my 2 daughters behind was daunting, but I had an amazing director who said to me, if you don't go, I'm going to put you in the car and drive you there myself. This is the best career opportunity you could ever have. And I couldn't thank him enough, because it was a catalyst for my career. Yeah. I spent what should have been 4 months in London, ended up being nearly 5 years. Loved every minute of Docklands Light Railway, working for Circa and then Keolis. And then got offered the opportunity to go to Manchester and become service delivery director for Manchester Metrolink in Manchester, which is the biggest tram system in the UK. Did that for 3 years, and then again got a phone call from the then managing director of Hull Trains saying they had a service delivery director vacancy. Would I be interested in coming and working for Hull Trains? And I think it was quite a moment for me, because that was coming home. As you can tell from my accent, born and brought up in Hull. As a guard, I used to look across at the Hull Trains leaving to go to the capital and thinking, wow, they're proper trains. I would absolutely love to work for them. You know, the ladies used to wear long wool coats with big brimmed hats. Gentlemen wore suits with wool overcoats, and it all looked very airline type. transport, which was what it was aimed to do. And I used to look in awe at them, to think one day I'd end up as managing director of that business while I was a guard stood on platform 1 at Hull Station. Yeah, honestly, couldn't have written it. So came back to Hull Trains, was director for 6 months, and was then offered the opportunity to become managing director. And the business was in a pretty tricky period. We had unreliable rolling stock, lots of challenges with weather, and because you're open access, you tend to get the less than great rolling stock. So we took the decision to bring in 5 brand new trains, which was the making of the business, turned it around, and it's since then it's been a phenomenal success. Obviously, COVID had a profound impact on the business. We had to make some really difficult decisions to keep the business going, mothballing it, making some redundancies. But it's come back stronger than ever. And I have to say, reading the rail reform documents, it brings out and highlights what open access can bring to the rail industry. Fantastic operational performance, amazing customer satisfaction scores, and also the impact it has on the local economy. Hull Trains standing in King's Cross Station, looking at the photographs on the side of the train, the iconic blue, the Paragon fleet named after Paragon Station in Hull, the fact that we used Hull company to make the sandwiches, a Hull company to clean the trains, supporting Hull businesses, Hull theatres, Hull Gay Pride. It's so much more than just a metal box moving people. It's part and parcel of the city and the region, and I call it an ambassadorial tool for the city. We employ local people, we use local supply chain. So we were coming out of COVID. We'd made sadly some of the changes. We'd removed sadly some of the roles, the onboard catering team, unfortunately, who are now back, thank goodness. So if you ever travel on Hull Trains and there wasn't a trolley, blame me, because sadly it was my decision, but it was something we had to do to keep the business going and for the business to survive. We mothballed it twice and brought it back, and like I say, now it's doing wonderful things. It's really performing well. But then as we were coming out of that era, or that phase, and got a phone call to say, would I be interested in leading London buses? And it was one of those moments where you thought, are you sure? Me lead London buses, really? And I think, to put it into context, 8,500 buses, 24,000 bus drivers, and this role also is responsible for Victoria Coach Station, which is one of the largest coach stations in Europe. 800 coaches passes through that coach station a day. Dial Ride, which is also not for profit, 350 odd minibuses that take people with special needs or have difficulty transporting themselves. So it's enormous. So why would this girl from the north, why would they want me? But I took the really difficult decision to go. As I've said before in the last podcast, my book of choice is Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway. And imposter syndrome was absolutely raging, saying, you can't do this job, it's huge, blah, blah, blah. And I absolutely love Hull Trains. I can't tell you what it means. Getting on Hull Trains every week to go back to London to work for London TfL and lead the buses still gave me the opportunity to chat to the crew, to talk to the team. They'd come and sit with me while I was travelling along. We'd be chatting and catching up. A real family business. And honestly, I can't tell you how amazing they are, and how sad I was to leave. But I knew it was the right thing for me, and I knew that the business would continue to really grow because of the amazing people that were working behind the scenes, and they have just an amazing ethos. The culture there is absolutely phenomenal. So in August of 2021, I made that difficult decision of going back to London, and it was so hard. Honestly, Nina, it was so hard. I turned up on day one. It was still lockdown. I got my ironed plimsoll bag, if anybody remembers those, my brand new pack-up box, polished my shoes, and off I went, and arrived at at Palestra, which is where I was based. And guess what? There was nobody there apart from a guy on reception. And I found my PA was off on long-term sick. My senior executive advisor was about to go off on maternity leave, and the offices were deserted. There was nobody there. So trying to get to know your team while they were all obviously working remotely. I have to say I knew nothing about buses. It was never something that I'd ever looked at as a career option. Why, I don't know, because as I'm going to describe, it's got me hook, line and sinker. And yeah, so that was the start of a whole new journey. And I think, the team were a little bit sort of, well, who is she, this girl? Again, when I joined DLR, I had exactly the same response. This blonde woman from the north, what does she know? There's nothing about buses, just like I knew nothing about driverless trains. And they were feeling a little bit insecure because Claire Mann had done an amazing job, but she'd gone in the March and I was joining in the August, so there was a gap. So they'd had to, I won't say muddle along because they don't need to, they're fantastic at what they do, but it's always nice to have a leader. And so when I came along and I couldn't actually meet them face to face for quite a while, it was really difficult. And I'd never worked in a public transport environment before either, which is just totally different. And so there were some real challenges, and there were some real challenges in terms of trying to get them back working together as a team and bringing them back into the office and trying to grow that team ethos, which is in my DNA. What you'll see on anything I write internally, any communication, #better together. Trying to get that back in place was tricky. And I'm a big one for actually going out there and seeing the people that work in the business. And I couldn't do that either. So the minute I could, I was off like a shot, going out to bus stations and going to Victoria Coach Station and Dial-A-Ride and what have you. Wow, it's just, I can't tell you how proud I am and I was to have got that role and the amazing people that work there. And yeah, so that's how it all started. And slowly but surely we grew relationships and people got to know me and my wacky ways. And in fact, I drank Yorkshire tea and ate licorice all sorts and all the things that probably, if they watch this, they'll laugh and go, yeah, that's right, that's her. But yes, and yeah, I think we grew a great team, and I thoroughly enjoyed every single minute of it.
There's definitely a theme, isn't there? And well, I know that there's a few themes. When I think about the conversations you and I have had over the years that we've known each other, which is a long while now, then I think there are two things for me that always stand out, which are kind of that I associate with you. And one of them is definitely feel the fear and do it anyway. And it really made me smile when you mentioned going to London for the first time for the DLR role, and your manager saying to you, if you don't go, I'm going to put you in the car and drive you there myself. This kind of feeling that you've got to let go of the ledge. And you've got to be prepared to jump. And I think whether that was the start of it for you in terms of realizing that, I'm going to quote another line out of a book now, but there's that is it out of, I can't remember what film it's out of. Somebody will tell me, where they say, what if I fall? Yes, my darling, but what if you fly?
Exactly.
I'm going to take the leap, but what if I plummet to the ground? Well, actually, you fly. You're gonna go with it, but you've got to have that courage to be able to do it in the first place. I love the fact that that then became a theme through your career. It's like, I don't know anything about buses, but I'm going to do it anyway.
Yeah.
Well, somebody's obviously got faith in you. They've given you the role. So clearly people believed in you and knew you could do it. But then you've quite openly admit nothing about buses.
Yeah.
What you do now. So,
and also, Nina, what I think is that, and I've said this so many times before, as a leader, you're the conductor of the orchestra. You're not the person that plays the violin, the flute, the double bass. You've got those subject matter experts, and a leader, you've got to have faith and trust that they can play the tune. And I always think, that conductor of the orchestra is probably one of the best analogies in terms of what my role is. So trying to convince people that I didn't need to be an expert in buses. I needed to be an expert in being a supportive leader, someone who people trusted in me, that they felt they could come to me, that I would be that safety net for them.
Yeah.
And slowly but surely, I think that came across, and that's something that I've always tried to embed into people, that, because I arrived and didn't know anything about buses, I did know about how to support people to make sure they were resilient, that they had the tools they needed to do their job. And I was one of those tools. I was one of those tools that I hope they felt they could turn to in their hour of need, and it was a safe space for them to come and vent, or, and for me to understand what was needed for us to take buses and Victoria Coach Station and Dial-A-Ride into a whole new post-COVID era. And for me, it was all about me making sure that together we set a strategy that was going to take us out of this awful period where buses in London were empty. The Dial-A-Ride was not, reduced the number of services they offered. Victoria Coach Station were going through its own challenges. But together we would work out a strategy, and we'd stick to that strategy, and we'd work through it, and with the aim of bringing it back even more successfully than it was before COVID.
Yeah. And that kind of, a lot of what you've just said there as well is kind of bringing me to the second theme. If the first one that I associate with you is the willingness to let go of the ledge, to feel the fear and do it anyway, and trust that it'll be okay. And the second one, and you may have talked about this so much over the years, is imposter syndrome. And I know that I've, perhaps on occasion used a harsh tone of voice with you, kind of like, you need to recognize, see yourself as other people see you. But that description that you've given us of being the conductor of the orchestra really speaks to this for me, of saying you knew what your role was. And that role did not entail you knowing how to play the flute, the double bass, the violin, the bloody clarinet, all the rest of it. All it required of you was to coordinate that team and make sure that everybody had the right piece of paper, the right sheet of music to read from, and that they all knew when their bit needed to come in, because that was on the sheet of paper. We've all got a plan. There's the strategy. It might be the most complicated piece of music you've ever read in your life, but we've communicated it. We all know what part we're playing in it, and you stand at the front and
exactly
the baton. So I think that's a brilliant example. And I guess over time, as a leader, that confidence grows, doesn't it? Because you start to realise as people respond to you and perform and improve their performance, that you're doing something right.
And I also think, the art of good leadership as well is knowing your people. So each person has their own needs. Some people like to have an arm around the shoulder, other people like to be left alone, and you just check in and make sure they're okay. They don't want to be fussed over. And I think getting to know each one of those, and the bit I really used to enjoy was, in all businesses I've been in, is when it's the end of the day and there's the odd person still in the office, just going over, sitting on the edge of their desk and saying, if you know the dog's just been poorly, or it's the child's first day at nursery school, just sitting on the edge of the desk and saying, how's Rosie? How did her first day go? Or, I know that you played in a big football match last week. How did that go? Just getting to know them as people, so that they can feel as if you actually know them as individuals, and that you care about them and you value them in the team, and we don't sheep dip everybody. And I think that for me is absolutely priority. And that was something that I've always felt throughout my career, is that we treat people as individuals. We've all got our own skills. I know that, I've never been to university. I'm not an academic, but I've got other skills, and I've got other things that are important to a business. And that applies to everybody in business, is that they've all got their skills and their talents, and it's drawing them out, and it's encouraging them, just as somebody encouraged me. And, those end of day conversations on the edge of a desk, or me going over and asking if they want a coffee, let's just have a sit and a chat about how you're feeling about your role at the minute, or, giving them some feedback and what have you. That whole people engagement piece is just critical for you to deliver, and for the team to feel valued, and really encourage them to want to keep going. And for me, in a selfish way, I want them to want to work with me. I want them to want to trust me. And I think that is just so important. Really, I don't do a lot. I work and I almost facilitate. I'm almost a facilitator, if you want to call it that. but having their support and their confidence in me as their leader is absolutely critical.
Do you know what I would describe you as a leader? The term I would use is a compassionate leader.
I
And
hope so.
I think that is definitely a term that I would associate with you. I think you are one of the best listeners that I've ever met, certainly of anyone in a leadership position. But I think that the compassion that you show for other people, bearing in mind the jobs that you have done since I've known you, have been big jobs. And yet you always have taken the time, especially during the pandemic, to reach out to me to say, how are you? How are you getting on? How are you doing? And that is massive. It's absolutely massive. See, I'm getting a bit emotional now.
But my picture of you was sat there, and all I could think about was, well, who are you talking to? You know, not so much. You know, it's just who are you talking to? Who is that person that? And you know that we're all human beings, and we're all, you know, and COVID was just so difficult, and I just thought, well, you know, I can't help in any other way than to say, well, I'm here, you know, let's have a chat. I'll get a cup of coffee, you get a cup of coffee. How are you feeling? And
I remember
it
it
helps
so
them.
I think that compassion, the fact that you are genuinely interested in people, and I kind of, it's one of my soapbox topics. It's kind of, yes, we work in the transport industry, and yes, there's a lot of hard stuff in the transport industry. There's like pieces of metal that kind of go on tracks or drive around roads. But it's not about the train or the bus. It's about the people that drive the train, work on the train, on board the bus, the people who make it all work, everything that's going on behind the scenes. And to have you in the conductor role, not just issuing instructions and handing out the sheet music, but actually caring about each individual and making sure they've got the right instruments to play the right music with. All of that, I think, for me, that is a description of you, is that compassionate leader. And I personally, I'm going to put it right out there in the public domain. I think that's one of the reasons, the key reasons why you've been such a successful leader.
Yeah, thank you.
And now, so as of last December, that enviable role comes to an end because, and I'm not going to mention your age because women, we don't do that, do we?
You can.
But you know, when you told me, however, 2 years ago, that you had a big birthday, it's like, no way. Absolutely no way on this earth. So when people were like, oh, are you retiring? Well, you know, when you're old enough to retire. So even if technically you are, you're not retiring, are you?
No, I hate that word. I absolutely hate it. So I mean, it's really difficult because I'm 63 in June. As most people have, I've worked hard all my life, and it's funny. I had one of the moments at probably midway through last year. I was sat in a few meetings, looking around, thinking, "Oh my goodness, I'm way older than anybody else in this room." You know, I really feel like I shouldn't be here. You know, it's just like I'm just too old. And it really got me thinking about what I still wanted to do, and that's why I don't like the word retirement, because I haven't retired. I have taken a step back from being encased in a role, and obviously having to put 110% into that. I've learnt so much in the last 20 odd years in heavy rail, light rail, bus, tram, all the different modes of transport, that I really want to use all of that learning somehow. And so it was one of those really, really difficult times, and I lost a lot of sleep over shouldn't I do it, because I loved working at TfL, and I think I could have stayed a lot longer if I'd wanted to, and they did. But I just thought, well, it's my time now to have a bit of choice and to do things, have a bit of variety, and women in bus and coach, which we'll come on to a minute, but women in bus and coach is really, really important to me. I'm so passionate about it. And so I thought, well, what about if I did some women in bus and coach, and then I also look at maybe a couple of non-executive director roles where I can offer something to a board, all the things I've learned from being in director and MD roles. If I can do that for another business, that would be fantastic. And also perhaps helping with some strategic thinking as well. At this point in time, I'm having lots of conversations with people, and it's been really lovely. You never know how popular you are till you leave a business or you die, I always say. And so it's been really nice.
Louise.
It's been really nice, people ringing me and asking me if there's stuff. I would be very happy to go and work abroad for short periods of time. I don't know, but I'm not discounting anything. My parents always said to me, if someone knocks on your door, never slam it in their face. And so at the minute, having conversations. But every morning I diligently get up, I run my 5 miles, I come back, have a shower, have my breakfast, and then start working on Women in Bus and Coach and any other people who want to talk to me. So that's where I am at the minute. And Women in Bus and Coach has taken off like nothing I ever expected it would. So
take us back. I mean, I know the story of where this idea came from, but
yes,
some of our audience may not know. So
okay.
Take us back to the moment when you kind of had this idea that this was what was required, and then kind of on the basis of, well, if somebody needs to do it and actually no one else is coming, so it better be me. How did that happen?
Yeah.
Where did the idea come from?
So when I joined the bus industry, I inherited an enormous problem with driver shortages. Now in London, it was that bad that it was really impacting on reliability. You can have the nicest buses and the most fantastic buses in the world, but if they don't turn up, then the key to any good customer experience is reliability. And when I joined TfL, we were looking at about a 10% bus driver shortage, which when you've got 25,000 bus drivers, that's 2,500 vacancies, which is a lot.
It's a lot.
And because I was new, I could ask the why questions, and I started asking those questions, and I started digging into, having a look at data and asking, how many bus drivers were women, and the answer I got back just floored me when they said 9%. And I thought, well, if there's only 9% of women that are bus drivers, you've got this enormous pool of talent somewhere that we can fish from. And the problem you have is that if you fish from a shallow pool, the quality will be affected. So because there weren't a lot of people coming forward to want to be bus drivers, it was starting to affect customer service. It was starting to affect a lot of things. And I was part of Women in Northern with Caroline Wilson when we first started that back in about 2007, 2008, which then transitioned into Women in Rail. And I take no credit for Women in Rail. It's an amazing achievement. But, I used to go to the meetings and help where I could. So I knew it had been a success. When I left Hull Trains, 55% of the train drivers were women, which is a statistic that's just doesn't happen anywhere else. So I knew there was scope to change this, and if we were going to increase the number of bus drivers, we had to think of a way of doing it. And so the minute I found out what lack of diversity there was in the bus and the coach industry, I was sat on the edge of a desk talking to somebody late one night, Kerry Cheek, who's amazing, and she deals with the safety element of buses, and the two of us sat there, and I said, do you know what, why don't we do what Women in Rail did? Why don't we start a Women in Bus and Coach? And we both looked at each other and went, yes, go on, let's try it. And we didn't really know at that stage whether there would be any interest in it, because there had to be a reason why women didn't want to come forward. And moving quickly on to when I was in as a director, one of the things that I always like to do was go out and about. And so I'd say to one of my direct reports, come on, let's go out and show me bus stations, show me Stratford bus station, show me, lots of bus stations, loads of them in London. And I'd say, now show me the facilities, show me the mess room, show me the toilet. Oh my goodness, Nina.
Yeah.
I always default to, I've got 2 daughters and I've got 2 granddaughters, and would I want them to be in the bus and coach industry with those facilities? No, I wouldn't. And it soon became clear to me that if we were serious about growing bus drivers, creating a diverse workforce, we had to have the underpinning facilities to support that, whether that was cab design, whether that was uniform, whether that was rest facilities, and that all formed part of why we launched Women in Bus and Coach, to really raise awareness of the fact that there are a lot of women out there who would like to work, possibly driving a bus, but can't work 7 or 8 hours straight shifts. We had all this in rail, working accommodated hours, working, sharing a line on a roster and all of that great stuff. So we set about launching Women in Bus and Coach, and I have to say I can't thank Andy Lord enough, because he's probably been our biggest supporter, along with Lord Peter Hendy, who I knew we needed somebody big in transport to support us. And so I bravely picked up the phone and I rang Lord Peter and said, do you fancy having a coffee and a sticky bun? And so we met, and I told him what I wanted to do, and he went, of course, I'll be your sponsor. And again, sadly, you need those people to really resonate this. And so we've got some great allies. We've got some great male allies, Andy Lord, Lord Peter, Leon, lots of people who are very senior in transport who've walked up and supported us. So we had our first event in June last year, very, very hot day in June, and it was almost like a soft launch to see whether there would be any interest, and we got some speakers and we set about arranging it. And I can't tell you the atmosphere, it was unbelievable. And women were saying to me, we've never ever had this opportunity as women to all get together. It wasn't just women, there were some men there, but the women absolutely loved the fact that they could all get together and talk about their role, the challenges that they have. And from there, it's just ballooned beyond anything I could have ever imagined. And, we've now got websites, we've got lots of social media. We've just announced our board.
Yes, I saw that.
Business. And as I was saying to you earlier, this has to be done properly. If this is to be sustaining throughout the years, and I'm not going to be around much longer, it has to have a really firm foundation to grow from. So setting up things like governance, policies, finances, all of that stuff has to be done properly. So you've got a really great firm foundation for this to grow from. And it takes a lot of work, it takes a lot of effort from a lot of people who have all got day jobs. They're all busy doing the jobs that they get paid to do. And so it's very time consuming, but as I said to you earlier, the transport industry has given me so much, and I cannot thank it enough for what it's done for me. And if I can give something back, and if I can make other women see what the art of the possible is, then that for me is everything. And that seems to be happening. We're finding trailblazing women all over the place, women who are hiding behind bushels all over the place. So we're trying to bring them out to say, we need you to show people what you can achieve. And, all of them have been happy to do that. And some of them, like myself, have come from tricky backgrounds, but very, very happy to share their experiences. So, it's wonderful. And it's not down to me. There's a great amount of people that are helping and doing things to really grow it. And the bus operators, the bus manufacturers, the uniform suppliers, the list is endless. They're all wanting to be part of this because they see this for them as a huge opportunity to grow their workforce, grow their resource, and succession plan. If for me, the whole bus, coach, road, public transport sector is on the cusp of something massive with decarbonisation and wanting to remove cars off the road. You can't do that if you haven't got the resource to drive the buses, drive the trams, drive the DLR. You've got to have people to do it. And right now we've got a resource shortage. So it's a double whammy, really. From either end of the lens, from an operator's point of view, they need these people for their businesses to be a success. And from the other side of the lens, my side of the lens, which says, guess what? Transport is an amazing career. You can go as far as you want to go. Highlighting that and finding out what women need to succeed is so important.
I think that you're a brilliant example of somebody who has consciously decided to pay it forward, because you recognise that the transport industry, has provided you with such a great career.
Yeah.
And from kind of entering it in the first place so that you could afford to get your daughters to university, and achieving that and having 2 grown-up daughters and now 2 granddaughters. A hugely successful career in transport, but that now kind of, it feels like it's so important to you to then pay that forward. And I know that you've shared with me in the past, and it was probably on the first podcast where you talked to me about how significant Diane Crowther was early on in your career, Diane Perry as she is now, in terms of encouraging you to put your head above the parapet and go for it. And I think that's the other thing that you do so well, and you encourage other people to do, is that we want people from outside sector to be able to see successful women in bus and coach, because if we can see it, we might be able to be it ourselves. So I think
100%.
two, and I make no apologies, both may be considered to be cliched points, but you're paying it forward, and you're really putting your money where your mouth is in terms of that see it to be it. You've done it, and you're there. You literally, as I've said to you, you're throwing the ladder down and you're pulling people up. And I just think that is so significant and a massive legacy for you as well.
Thank you. And like I say, it means an awful lot to me, because I have experienced things, even looking at my opportunity in bus, to be around the Queen's Platinum Jubilee, her funeral, the King's coronation. I'll never forget standing I was going around the bus stations in London to make sure everybody was okay, and hearing the roar of the crowd when the King appeared from Buckingham Palace. I'll never forget that. And I'm a girl from Hull. I mean, and and if someone else can experience, going to the Middle East or going to Australia, all of this is as a result of being in the industry. And so, and I will say to any young person, if you don't really know what career you want to go into, why don't you just do a bit of digging and look what's in transport, whatever transport mode that might be, because it's offers amazing opportunities.
So we can both say with our hands on our hearts that we love the transport industry, and for personally, and I think I can speak for you as well, we wouldn't want to work in any other industry. We love it. We've got a passion for it. But it's not perfect in every way, is it, Louise?
No, it definitely isn't that.
Okay, so back in November 2020, I gave you 3 wishes and said, right, what would you like to change? I was going to say then things have moved on. I'm not sure they've moved on quite.
Not that far, no.
Actually, but I'm gonna give you a special treat and give you 3 more wishes.
Thank you. That's really kind.
So, what would you like to see change in the transport?
So I think the first one is obviously around diversity. So, as I said, I've got 2 granddaughters. One's 10 months old and the other's 11. I don't want women to be something different in an industry. I want women to just be part of an industry, and that's not just about transport, that's any industry. So at the minute we're talking about women as if there's something different, and we shouldn't be different. We should be just part of an industry. And as I've said to you earlier, my hashtag Better Together, we offer something to, diversity is such a precious thing to have in a business. And so, if in 10 years' time, if I'm still on this planet, I'd love to think that women are just part and parcel of any industry. They're not, well, we've got to do this and we've got to do that, and we might have to change this, and we don't want to be unique. We just want to be part of everyday life, and whatever that career or whatever organisation that is. Don't want to be treated any differently. We just want to make sure that people recognise that we have a place. And so for anyone leaving school in years to come, they can pick any career that they want to pick, because you are no different from anyone else. And I think that applies to all forms of diversity, not just gender. So that would be my first wish. I want the best for my granddaughters, and I want them to be able to do whatever they want to do. And so that would be amazing. I think the second wish from me is about public transport. I think there's an element of people not wanting to use buses, for example, because I don't want to be on a bus, because the last time they experienced a bus was when they went onto a swimming lesson when they were 11 and it was rattly rolly and the windows were all steamed up, and they're not like that anymore. And certainly London is leading the way in. If you ever travel on a Route 63 bus with glass sunroofs, USB chargers, bell pushes on every seat, coffee shop flooring, LED lighting, they are amazing things now, and they're not like the old-fashioned buses. And give it a go. If we are serious about the environment, if we're serious about clean air, safer streets, we've got to encourage people to want to use public transport more. There's enough said about the railway at the minute. Every time you switch on the news, we talk about the railway, but we don't hear the same about the bus and coach and tram and what have you. Give it a go. And I would really love in 10 or 15 years' time that public transport is the default they go to first and foremost. If they have got a car, they leave it at home, and that we've got a public transport system that really delivers and gives people what they need. It's reliable, it's clean, it's forward thinking, because it really helps our economy and our environment and in so many ways. And just give it a go, because we've got to change. If we are serious about global warming and all that goes with the environment, we've got to change our habits. And it is a habit, jumping in a car as opposed to getting a bus if you're lucky enough to have one. We've got to change that. And I speak at a lot of colleges and schools and prize givings and things. And young people have got such a strong moral compass. When I was 17, the first thing I wanted to do was get my driving license and jump in a car. That gave me the freedom. You don't have that with young people anymore. They know the damage we've done to their world, and they want to put it right, and they don't want to be blamed for it. And so they want that choice. Now in London, you're really lucky because you've got that choice. There's buses 24 hours a day. There's the tube, there's the Elizabeth line, there's bikes, there's cable cars, you name it. There's the connectivity in London is amazing, and people just need to recognise that and start thinking about their future family, children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, and actually start to really, because they can make a difference. They really can, and we need to reduce the number of cars off the road because of the damage it's doing.
Absolutely. I completely agree with you in terms of it's a habit, it's a behaviour. We can change that, but it's got to be a conscious choice to change, doesn't it?
Yes.
And I was a bit scared of using the bus, Louise. If I use kind of me as an example here, use the underground. I kind of know what I'm doing with that, and I use trains on a regular basis. But I had a real kind of fear around using the bus in London.
Do you pay? Do you tap in? Do you tap out?
Yes, it's like, and how am I going to know when to get off? Because I don't actually know where Anyway, I discovered the City Mapper app.
Yes, it's great.
Amazing. And that will be my first choice, because as much as the underground is amazing, I think it's incredible feat of engineering as much as anything else. If you're sat on the bus, you can see where you're going. It's far more interesting than it is sitting underground in my. But once I'd started using it, it's now become a habit that's what I do. Going back 10 years, I was getting taxis everywhere because I didn't know where I was going, but I didn't have the confidence to use the bus. And I don't now. I'll either walk is my first option, then the bus. And
I think, people don't realise that the traffic lights in London are default to giving bus priority. So, it might not go as fast as you'd like it to go, but it should go faster than cars go, just because that's how the system is set up. So, and my third wish, which goes along something along those lines, is can we have the same in the north? I've lived in London for quite a few years, and coming back up north, you get a bus in the morning and a bus at night, if you're lucky. If in Hull we don't have a nighttime economy, we don't have night bus. I really want government to recognise that the north is entitled to great transport links. It was disappointing about HS2 phase 2, but actually, if the government honour their promise of using that money to support local transport, let's get the basics right. In my view, HS2 is great, but why don't we get the basics right first? And if we can use the money that is available, not just in the railway, but on buses, on trams, on public transport,
Yeah,
to really improve the north. And the Prime Minister came up to Goole a few weeks ago and promised that he would give us the money for public transport. It didn't specify rail. If that's the case, that would be amazing. And we have a shortage of bus manufacturers. If you think about how many electric or hydrogen buses are going to be needed in the future, you think about Manchester, you think about London, you think about Wales, we're all going into franchised bus operation, all wanting to decarbonise their bus fleet. We're at a point now where we're a bit like we were a few years ago with electrifying the railway with Hitachi and Alstom. And now we're at the point where we're going to be having to manufacture a lot of buses in the future. I mean, London alone needs 8,500, and then you look at Scotland, Ireland, Wales. Who's going to manufacture all these buses? And we should bring that manufacturing into the UK. So if, for example, Alstom are having to close their factory because they haven't got the orders for the trains, open a bus factory. There's all that expertise, there's that supply chain. Let's bring the manufacturing of buses into the UK and use, if Hitachi factory is running out of orders, let's use the Hitachi workforce. They're all skilled people. We've got all the skills and the workforce and the buildings to actually be able to build these buses, because we're going to need so many of them. And at the minute, it's a case of a lot of them are built in China or in Egypt, and that's great. I'm not saying that's the wrong thing, but there's a huge opportunity for the UK workforce here. And we've got bus manufacturers in Scarborough, in Northern Ireland, in Scotland. We need more in the UK to be able to supply the UK, but all the rest of the world is wanting to decarbonise its bus fleet too. And if we're serious about getting cars off the road, buses is the obvious answer to that. So we need a reliable bus service and a reliable bus that is going to be built. And ideally, we build those buses in the UK.
It's a great opportunity there. I could talk to you for hours, as we have done in the past, I know, because I find our conversations so interesting. But I have to, for the purposes of the podcast, I have to come to our last question, which is, on those mornings, like you described earlier, what happens in your day, and you wake up and you're out for your 5-mile run. If you wake up in the morning and you think, you know what, I'm really not fancying this morning, I just want to pull the covers back over my head.
Mm-hmm.
What inspires you, Louise? What motivates you? What gives you the energy that you have to be doing all of the stuff that you're doing?
I just think about how lucky I am, and I never ever take for granted what I have. From where I was, with my 2 daughters, trying to make a living and trying to give them what they deserved in life in terms of good education, and to see where I am now. To waste that time would be criminal. So every minute of every day that I have, being able to live in a lovely house and be in a lovely city and have a great set of ex-colleagues and the people that I know, how could I ever take that for granted, and to stay in bed a minute longer than I need to, by the way, annoys the heck out of my husband. He says, why can't you sleep in? I'm like, no, it's 6:30, I've got to get up, I can't waste the day. It drives him crackers. I will never be able to thank whoever it is up there or down there or wherever they are for what they've given me, and I will carry on until my last breath, making the most of life, and whatever that happens to be as the years go on.
Brilliant. Love that. There's a lot to be said for gratitude and for recognising how lucky we are, how fortunate we are, but also I do believe, and this has come out on so many podcasts recently, I do believe we make our own luck to a great extent. And I'm a huge believer in the more good stuff you put out there, the more good stuff comes back. And I think that you are a absolutely brilliant example of that.
Yeah, thank you.
Give so much, so you deserve everything that comes back to you. Louise Cheeseman, founder and chair of Women in Bus and Coach and senior strategic advisor. Huge thanks to you for joining me again on the podcast. I've thoroughly enjoyed the conversation. I'm confident our audience will too. And I shall look forward to watching the next adventure unfold. Thank you.
Thanks, Nina.
My huge thanks to Louise for joining me for a repeat visit to the virtual couch on the Intuitive Insights podcast. I hope you enjoyed it. I'd really appreciate it. You share the link of the podcast amongst your network, anyone that you think would be interested in hearing about the wide range of topics that me and Louise have talked about today. Thank you so much for your support. It's much appreciated.